Today we're going to be talking about the first move, and there are, I think, three parts of the golf swing where generally there is uncertainty, and we're going to be talking about these areas this week on the channel. And this just comes from feedback when I meet people online, face to face, and those three elements of uncertainty are the start of the downswing. You know, Russ, what should I do? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing this with my wrist? Should I be pulling the club down? Should I be turning my body? What should happen? Another one is sort of pre-impact. So although it's happening really quickly, I get a lot of people asking questions, well, if I brought the club down into this position, how do I get the club on the back of the golf ball? Again, a really sort of legitimate, good question that you need to build your understanding towards. And the third one is the first move. It's the takeaway. It's kind of like, how should I move the club back? Should I move my hand? Should I move my body? What should I be doing? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is very much that first movement. Now, what I tend to say to people is that you are always going to see differences in the golf swing. Always going to see some variety in the golf swing. But what we try to do as golf coaches is, and what we're trying to educate amateur golfers is, if you don't have an abundance of time to practice, and if you don't necessarily have a huge amount of coordination, then you want as few moving parts as possible. And that's what I try to do to hit home on the channel. Now, today, this first motion, we're going to talk about the simplicity of what should happen and one sort of little strange motion that tends to go a little bit more unnoticed. First of all, the general principle in the takeaway, if we're keeping it really simple, is we are essentially just going to be moving the hands and arms to the side of the body like so. Okay, that is essentially all that's happening. You are going to be moving your hands and arms to the side of your body, and what will happen as you do this is this will encourage a natural amount of rotation of the chest. You don't want to really be thinking about rotation in the first move. You start rotating too soon, and this is what I've been talking about recently, those of you that have been watching the channel, about the leg motion. We don't want to, in the early part of the backswing position, be moving excessively. Okay, so as we take the club back to that takeaway position, which is roughly this sort of area here, yes, there'll be a little bit of rotation, but the reason why you're rotating is because you're just moving the hands and arms to the side of the body. If you didn't rotate at all, you'd end up too far in this position here. So that's the first thing. If there's any of you that are sort of thinking, should I move my hips first? Should I shift my weight first? Should I turn first? No, just move the hands and arms to the side of your body. And for those of you that have difficulty with short game and pitching, that'll be why. Because you're overcomplicating the simple shot of just hands to the side of the body and then hands to the side of the body, and your body will naturally rotate to give you the ability to do that. So if that's the simplicity of that, we will have questions about where exactly should your hands go. And to sort of answer that, all you need really are, well, technically one thing, maybe two, and an alignment stick. Now, alignment sticks when you practice are just absolutely vital. You know, having solid alignment, I would say, is where 90% of golfers go wrong. You start aiming in the wrong direction, you're going to be making compensations. Now, what I'm going to do for the benefit of this video is I'm going to place one alignment stick like so, which is going roughly towards my target, and I'm just going to place another one perpendicular like so, just so I can show you again from that sort of side-on perspective. Now, what we're looking to do is, the simplicity is that the shaft of the golf club effectively just needs to keep pointing down towards my target line as I take the club back. So if I show you from this side-on perspective now, just scoot that up a little bit. And I just do it this way because it's just too dark from the back part of the camera, especially on a nice day like today. So as I take it back, you can see the way the shaft of the club is pointing down towards my target line. And that would be known as being on plane in that takeaway. So if I took my arms maybe too close to my body, I'd be under plane. And if I took my arms too far away from my body, I would be too far above plane. Now, none of these are huge mistakes. You can still recover in your golf swing, but it's like I said earlier, we want the hands just working up and down the same sort of line. We don't want to be getting the hands working in, up, out, down and across. It brings in my opinion, unnecessary coordination. So that's that. And if you've ever got uncertainty, all you need is just to understand that you basically keep the shaft pointing down towards that line as you take it back, nice and easy. Now, there's one other element Now, depending on how you hold the golf club will also influence this as well. But what you are trying to do throughout your golf swing is you are basically trying to get the shaft in line with your left arm. Now, when you hold the golf club, as I'm demonstrating here, you can see that even though I'd introduce a small amount of shaft lean, you can see the way that if you drew a line through my lead arm, it's not in line with the shaft of the golf club. And we basically want that to be in line in the backswing position, because that helps us flatten the wrist a little bit, and it helps us set that wrist position so that we can hit it flat here. So that basically means in that early backswing, there needs to be a very subtle amount of right wrist hinge. Now, I'm showing you DJ now from a face-on perspective because he's somebody who has a lot of hinging motion on the back of that trail wrist, and you can see it more dramatized with the way he takes the club back. Now, you only need a subtle amount, and like I said, the subtle amount would be if you held the club out in front of you and if you just hinge the back of your trail wrist to the point where the shaft then got back in line with your left arm, like so. You see that's now nicely in line, so not like so, different angles, nicely in line, and that's what you need. And that little subtle difference now is how you get that little trigger motion. Okay, so what you do is simultaneously, whilst we're thinking about moving our hands to the side of the body, we're also just going to be hinging the back of that trail wrist, and by doing that, that's just going to help flatten that lead wrist a little bit and just get the club looking a little bit more like so. If you don't do that and you just basically take the club solely to the side of your body, you're going to end up with a lot of wrist angle in that first motion, and you're going to have to flatten it at some point anyway to a degree. So I personally would advocate you might as well get into the habit of just flattening it a little bit earlier. Now, the last benefit to flatten it a little bit earlier in introducing that hinge is then you can start to feel that hinging motion a little bit on some of your chip shots. Okay, especially some of those sort of mid and low flighted shots, you can start to get a feeling of hinging it back and then holding on to that angle, and that's just going to give you that sort of flat sort of trajectory. Okay, and if you were to not do that, then you would be more cupped, and that would pop the ball up a little bit higher. So what I'm trying to say is that the takeaway motion is also a really important skill set to influencing trajectory on some of your shorter shots as well, which we'll come to. But to summarize out of today, the key things that you're trying to do with the takeaways, understand that your arms are moving to the side of your body while simultaneously you're trying to encourage a small amount of wrist hinge on that trail wrist to the point where it just helps flatten that lead wrist. And if you can get that, you're going to start to have a really solid takeaway position, and you're going to be setting that wrist position nice and early. So all you have to do then is just lift that club up and then hold onto those wrist angles as best as you can in that through swing. Let me know how you guys get on. I'll catch up with you really soon.